I started to identify various shifts, but the major shift comes around 2000 when the census results came out, and we start to hear a conversation, a discourse, a national narrative that basically says that African Americans are no longer the majority minority, that now Latinos are the important minority. And in fact, we've moved into a place, because of the presence of Latinos, where we don't really have to talk about race anymore. We have achieved some type of equality. And of course, 20 years later, 10 years later, you get the election of Obama, and that supposedly cements the deal. But in this whole conversation that starts taking place around 2000, the black-brown divide, the black-brown conflict, the hostility between the blacks and the browns becomes a louder and louder voice, and it's one that Juan and I are very uncomfortable with. And so we start to do more work around the issues of what it means to be black and what does it mean to be brown. And clearly from our experience, there are a lot of black people in that brown, and there are a lot of browns in what people understand as black. And the Afro Latino clearly falls between those cracks.
That I found that the two parts of that, the black part and the Puerto Rican part, were kind of separate. And there was either you were black or you were Puerto Rican. Either you were doing black studies or you were doing Latino studies. And I didn't see that was the way things were. People could be doing work on black Latinos, which is part of the black population and part of the Latino population. And not only is the relation between those groups really important, but also there are people who embody, in their very bodies, embody both. And we know, as Miriam was saying, that public discourse tries to keep them apart. You're either one or the other. And we're saying, well, what about the people who are both? What happens to that group? And what effect can they have on tying together and cementing relations and alliances and coalitions between the African American and the Latino, instead of pitting them against each other? Maybe we can see them in coalitional unity with one another and representing then the majority of the country. Let's put it that way. And I'll mention too that, it's not just to create another identity. I mean, we got loads of identities, the flavor of the month, whatever. It's not about that. It's about identifying discrimination and inequality. Of course, human cultural roots are very important. We're not denying the importance of that. But it's clearly established that in the US and elsewhere, the African descendant population is in the worst shape socioeconomically, and by all measures. And so that the dividing line, the racial line within the Latino community here, is one of inequality as well. And so it's not only invisible population, but the poorest, the ones with the least service, the ones with the least opportunities open to them because of race.
A recent racial struggle within our country has been the divide between Hispanics and blacks, even though being Hispanic can be inclusive of being black, and being black can be inclusive of being Hispanic. When viewing the entire panel discussion, which you've just seen parts of, it is clear that our country has tried to separate blacks and Hispanics by making Hispanics the important minority. Bonilla spoke of this practice in Chapter 8 of our textbook, and how the United States is no longer black and white, but a stratified society with multiple races. In the chapter, Bonilla offered up a sketch of his hypothesis of the stratification of the future in our country, broken down into whites at the top, which included assimilated white Latinos, then the second level of honorary whites, which included light-skinned Latinos, and lastly, the collective black, which included dark-skinned Latinos, West Indians, and Black Americans. This practice of stratification has been detrimental specifically to Afro Latinos. Afro Latinos are of African descent, but may not always be dark-skinned. With that being said, Afro Latinos would fit into multiple levels of Bonilla's stratification predictions. But in the United States, this group is often forced to pick one box or level to fit into. This is rooted in the United States' protection of dominant racial groups by creating division between minorities. This division is enforced politically through tools like the census, where individuals are forced to pick one single box. With conversations in our society claiming that being Latino is superior to being black, Afro Latinos stripped themselves from being black in America in order to find racial privilege.